Hello. How are we doing today? Happy Wednesday. Hi Coco, hi Philip, hi Terror, hi HS. This account came in. Account was created 16 hours ago. They do not follow me, and they were basically like, yeah, my kids just died in a car accident, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do about that? Like, I'm sorry if that's true, but I don't know if that's true, man. Can you guys still hear the music a bit, or should I turn it up a smidge? I'm going to attempt to read more than I did last time, because I don't have a headache today, and I have both coffee and water, so caffeine headache or regular headache, and I can address it immediately. You can't hear it anymore. Okay, I could try to turn the music up a smidge. I do nice.
White heart.
White heart right back at ya. I hope you're doing good today. You the best. I appreciate you. 20 months? Oh my goodness. That's a lot of months. Okay. Let's see. Hardy boys. Yeah. I thought it was Spartan at first because Brady, my guy, he loves that Brady guy. We're gonna read a Nancy Drew Hardy Boys mystery. I did play Mystery of the Seven Keys. I recorded my podcast episode about it last night, and we talked for over 3 hours. So it's gonna end up being 2 episodes of my podcast. We had lots of thoughts about Mystery of the Seven Keys. One of us definitely had more good things to say than the other. But, Kauai is gonna have Hardy Boys? What do you mean? Is this you telling me Kauai is pregnant again? With twins? Or another boy? I feel isolated in that opinion here, though. I think overall, you're in the majority, Coco. You just happen to know people like me who are fuddy-duddies, so... This is a lot of intro. Are you sure that YouTube is gonna approve of it? No, I'll get reamed. She's having a second son. Congrats to her. Congrats to her. I think here, though, a lot of people don't like it. That's okay. I mean... I think we're kind of evenly divided. I don't know. But you will like a lot of what Ray has to say then, Coco. I'm reserving my opinion. That's fair. That's okay. Yeah, Summer is not able to play past the coffee, so I don't think she has much of an opinion other than I can't continue. We are at 40% apparently. Okay. All right. Let me take a little sip of coffee. And then we'll jump in. Chapter 6. Nancy, Bess, and George were speechless as they stared at what had once been their neat suite. All of their suitcases had been emptied, drawers pulled out and dumped, and the closet stripped. Gosh, even I couldn't make a mess like this, Bess murmured, gawking at the room. Nancy stepped over some bedding and examined a torn pillow at her feet. Slashed, she said. The mattresses, too. Someone was definitely looking for something. You guys mentioned something about getting shot at? Bess said quietly. Is there more you want to tell me before I pass out? Nancy and George quickly filled Bess in on what had happened down in the parking garage and afterward in the police station. Here's my money and your traveler's checks, Bess, said George, who'd been busy searching the floor around the bureau. Nancy, you had all your money on you, right? Yep, Nancy answered, wandering into the bathroom. Everything's okay in here, she frowned thoughtfully. Obviously this was no robbery. Also, it can't have been an attempt by the gunman to eliminate us as witnesses because he'd try to kill us, not trash our room. Then someone must have been searching for something, but what? George asked, as baffled as Nancy. Good question, Nancy said. Well, I know one thing, Bess broke in. I'm not staying in here another minute. I want to switch to another room, if not another hotel. Let's go see Rachel, Nancy suggested. I can't bother my dad just now. He's tied up all day. Outside Rachel Maxon's office a few minutes later, Nancy tapped on the half-open door. Rachel looked up from an enormous spread of papers on her antique white desk. The window behind her framed a spectacular view of Waikiki Beach. Hello, girls, she said, standing and moving toward them. I'm sorry I haven't spoken to you about your experience in the garage this morning. I tried to contact you, but you must have been tied up with the police. Are you all right now? She asked. We're fine, Nancy quickly assured her. But unfortunately, something else has happened. Rachel said nothing. Her mouth opened a little and moved silently up and down once. Our room has been ransacked, George said. What? Rachel exclaimed. Nothing was taken, but it's a wreck, Bess added. Is there any chance we could get another suite? Of course. Oh, of course, Rachel said breathlessly. I'm so sorry this has happened. She picked up a telephone on her desk. Renee, is 425 available? Good. You can transfer the belongings from 417. Also, ask security to meet me in 417 immediately. As Rachel hung up the phone, she winced and clutched her stomach. Are you all right? Nancy asked, concerned. I'll be fine, Rachel managed to say. I've got a stomach problem. Stress brings it on. Lately, I've been under a lot of pressure, and to top it off, now there are several global corporations who want to buy me out and tear down the Grand Hawaiian. That would be horrible. It's such an elegant old place, George said. But if they can get rid of me and put a high-rise on this land, they would make a lot more money, Rachel explained. They're trying to drive me out of business by renting rooms in their hotels for much less. But everyone loves the Grand Hawaiian, Nancy pointed out. Business seems good too. Maybe their tactics aren't working. If that were my only problem, Nancy, I could fight them, Rachel said with a sigh. But I have other troubles. She explained about the money she owed to the bank and the back taxes to the IRS. But how could things have gotten so out of hand? Bess asked. Rachel smiled sadly and said, Apparently, my father had a rare stomach disease that he never told anyone about, not even my mother. His treatments were expensive and not completely covered by insurance. Anyway, now the IRS is determined to collect the money I owe them. You can't believe the things I've had to do just to stay in business, she said almost to herself. Like what? Nancy asked. Rachel seemed startled, as if she'd just awakened from a dream. She shook her head and said dismissively, Oh, all sorts of things. I considered taking out a third mortgage, but even the bank advised me to tear down the hotel and build a high-rise. How could anyone advise you to tear down a beautiful old building? George said. When I was growing up, there were other lovely buildings here on Waikiki, some even more beautiful, Rachel said, remembrance in her eyes. They were valued for their beauty, but now the only value is profit, profit, profit. In the days before the big corporations, people took care of the land. There was no pollution. Now my beautiful Hawaii is becoming just like every place else. Listen to me about going on about my problems. After what you've been through today, I do apologize. It seems I've done nothing but apologize for the past half hour. Well, I won't say I'm sorry again, even though I am. She scribbled a note and handed it to Nancy. Please go and have some dinner on me. After thanking Rachel, the girls grabbed a quick snack and went to the lobby to wait for Frank and Joe. It was Willie Brannigan who was waiting for them instead. Listen, Bess, he told her, sounding nervous. I'm really sorry about this, but I can't make the dinner cruise tonight. Something's come up. Oh no, what is it? Bess asked. Willie became flustered. I have to help a friend who's moving, he said. His landlord threw him out kind of suddenly. Can I come? I can help, Bess suggested. He doesn't live in the kind of neighborhood you would want to be in, Willie said. Look, I'll see you tomorrow at Makaha, okay? We'll do another cruise for the night. I promise. Okay, Willie. Bess tried to smile, but it was clear she was terribly disappointed. He's not the best liar in the world, is he? George said as they watched Willie leave. George, has it ever occurred to you that you may be wrong about Willie? Bess asked, her voice raised. Sorry, I'm just disappointed. The dinner cruise sounded so exciting. Seeing the Hardys come in, Nancy waved. Hi, guys, she said, greeting them. Guess what? George said. Somebody broke into our room and tore it apart looking for something. What? Joe asked. Frank nodded seriously. It looks like as if we may all be in danger. Bess blinked. Even me? Frank shrugged. You're with us, aren't you? He said. I'd probably be safer with Willie Brannigan. Bess said. Nancy wasn't so sure, but didn't say anything. Well, come on, Frank said, leading them outside. We'd better head over to the Royal Mausoleum if we want to get there before our friends do. Hey, where's Willie tonight? Joe asked. Bess frowned. He canceled, she said, not meeting his eyes. Something came up. Something very vague and very sudden, Nancy said pointedly. Well, cheer up, Bess. I have a feeling you might run into Willie after all, Frank said under his breath. They all piled into the Hardys' convertible, driving uphill to the edge of town. Nancy turned and gazed out the rear. The orange of the sunset was reflected as a vast golden slick on the ocean's surface. Bess turned around, too. She saw only the boats pulling out of the nearby marina. There go the dinner cruise ships, she said wistfully. And I'm still hungry. How can you think of food at a time like this? George said. We're going to the Royal Mausoleum where the spirits of old Hawaii walk at night. Ooh. Quit it, George, Bess said, laughing in spite of herself. I don't need my own cousin scaring me to death. A few minutes later, Frank slowed down and steered off the shoulder of the highway. Here we are, Frank said. About 100 feet ahead was the entrance road to the mausoleum. We'll walk the rest of the way. They got out of the car and made their way to the deserted entrance of the mausoleum. There was no gate and no security guards visible. Look at the size of this place, Frank said, taking in the stately marble buildings set on the wide and open lawn. Mr. Watanabe said the budget cuts really hurt security at all the public museums, Joe explained. He wanted to put on some guards here, but the state couldn't afford it. Just past the gateway, signs pointed to various nature trails in the forested area around the museum. Frank pulled a brochure out of his pocket and read it in the dying light. According to this map, the trails come out at different points overlooking the mausoleum. I suggest we split up and go to the far ends of the trails to wait. When they break in, Joe will call the police on my cellular phone. If the cops haven't arrived by the time the crooks come out of the building with the goods, I'll whistle. Then we'll hold them till the police arrive. That ought to give them a shock. He turned to Joe. Did you check the phone? Joe nodded. It's working fine, he said. I brought flashlights for everyone, Frank said. Just one thing, Bess said. I don't want to go on one of those trails all by myself. It's going to be dark soon. Okay, Joe said. You can come with me, Bess. There seem to be 4 trails, which leaves one of you for each of the remaining 3. No way those guys can get in or out of here without one of us getting a good look at them. Unless we've got the wrong target, Frank reminded him. It's not a sure thing, Joe, remember? When we get in position, let's all flash our lights, okay? Nancy suggested. They all agreed and soon parted to find their trails. Nancy's led through dense woods filled with giant ferns. Rounding a bend, she froze in mid-step. Standing in front of her was a young man with wild, dark eyes. In his left hand, he held a bunch of giant yellow flowers. In his right, high above his head, was a machete. That's the end of chapter 6. I've seen that it feels like an AI wrote this opinion, which makes me sad. An AI couldn't do this. I don't think it's that bad. I do have quite a few critiques about 2 of the voice acting directions. I really don't think it's on the voice actors. I think it's like the dialogue written for those characters and the direction given to them in recording, but I talk about that a lot more. Yeah, I've heard about the save thing. I can't believe somebody would snoop through my stuff, Nancy Drew. I know, right? The irony. Be safe feeding beans. Hi, Lurky Page. Thank you for the shirt compliment. I will never ever turn my back on people who need me. The painted lady. Not the IBS! I know, right? Maybe it's Crohn's. It could be, I guess. Sorry. I'm sorry that I'm sorry is what I got from that. Literally, though. Thank you, Tara, for taking care of that, or... I appreciate it. I don't know. I was still catching up on chat, so I didn't see everything that just happened, but I trust you, so thank you for dealing with that. Hardy Boys on the cover, looking like they just caused a volcanic eruption. Yeah, they did. They were like, we dropped a bomb and go! Yeah, I mean, I knew that account was probably a troll because, like I stated, it was created 16 hours ago and doesn't follow me. But, Yeah, if somebody wouldn't mind maybe privately messaging me and telling me what that conspired to end up, like what that ended up happening, just a recap so I can be aware, but... No, and I think your love of the game is also valid, Coco. I think we just had very different experiences. So I'm not in any way trying to say that, like, I think you're wrong or anything, or that I think I'm right. I think I just had a very different experience than a lot of people did. I had a very different experience and perspective on Key than Ray did, and we talk about that a lot. But I almost feel like we are, like, we're just, like, different sides of the coin, and it's, like, the same coin, but we just looked at it in different ways and had different experiences with it, and I think that's totally fine and valid. And I had to come to a point where I had to tell myself that I am not any less of a Nancy Drew fan because of my opinion on Seven Keys, and I'm not a bad fan for feeling about it the way I do. And that was the guilt that I was dealing with for a lot of it, was that, like, maybe I just didn't try hard enough to like it. Maybe I didn't play it right. Maybe it was on me. But I came to this point where I was like, no, that's not true. Okay, thank you, Ter. I think it's definitely worth playing, Paige. I'm not in any way trying to discourage anybody from playing it. I think it's definitely worth playing. And in a lot of ways, they have taken a lot of steps in the right direction from Midnight in Salem. I think I just had higher expectations than were met, is kind of what it boils down to. Yeah, and it's like, you know, there are other fan favorites that I don't really care for, just like, you know, both HS and Coco, like you're saying. Like, I feel like a lot of people really like Silent Spy, and I don't really care for that one. I also am not a huge fan of Message in a Haunted Mansion, which I know is kind of like the classic favorite that a lot of people really like. So, you know, it's okay. I think the fandom is very diverse, and I think that's a good thing. I did order a physical copy, and it's because I got a digital copy for free. Someone very kind to me gifted me a copy. So because I had not paid for it, I figured I could justify paying for the physical. Thank you, Tara. I'll look at that soon. Actually, I'm going to look at that right now just because I'm really curious. Okay, that was odd. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's valid, Paige. Okay, shall we move on? Okay. Chapter 7. Her heart pounding, Nancy stared up at the machete blade, gleaming even in the fading light. It was poised, ready to slice her in half. Nancy watched in horror as the blade advanced slowly on her, raising the blade higher with each step. "Don't scream," he ordered, "or your neck will feel my blade." From his deeply tanned skin and dark eyes, Nancy guessed he must be a native Hawaiian. His glossy black hair hung straight to his shoulders, and around his forehead was a rolled purple bandana. "Who are you?" Nancy whispered. "I am the spirit of old Hawaii," the young man said mysteriously. "I am the will of my people." Staring at her intently, he was still and calm. "What do you want?" Nancy asked. "I want the plunder to stop," he hissed. "So do I," Nancy told him quietly. "You? But you're one of them, or else why are you here?" He continued to focus on her without seeming to blink. "My name is Nancy," she said softly. "Nancy Drew. I'm here to help stop the art thefts on this island. I'm here because I want to see all royal treasures returned to the people of Hawaii." The young man was torn. Obviously, he didn't want to believe a word she was saying, but just as obviously he did. "Don't lie to me. My people have been lied to long enough." Nancy now noticed that the blade of the machete was slowly being lowered. "I'm not lying," she told him. "I want to help. I can prove—" Nancy was cut short by the man's harsh words. "Drop the flashlight to the ground," he ordered. Nancy forced herself to remain calm and did as he asked. He picked up the light and beamed it at her for what seemed forever. You're an honest wahine, he said finally. Wahine? She repeated, confused by the strange word. Wahine is Hawaiian for woman, he explained. I see the spirit in your eyes now. It is true and clear. You are not one of them. And who are you? Nancy asked gently. I am Luke Kilauea, he answered calmly. Kilauea? That's the name of the volcano on the Big Island. It isn't your real name, is it? Luke nodded slowly. Oh yes, for generations. I am pure Hawaiian, full-blooded, like my parents and cousins. There aren't many of us left. We live on the island of Niihau. Niihau? I'm probably saying that wrong. Nancy vaguely recalled the name, but she couldn't place it. It's not one of the main Hawaiian islands. I know that from my guidebook. Luke's eyes flashed with contempt. You will not find Niihau in guidebooks. This island is the Forbidden Island. What do you mean, forbidden? Niihau is privately owned, and the family who owns it has allowed us native Hawaiians to make it ours and ours alone. We work on the family's plantation there and live our lives apart from the rest of the world. It is the last place where we can truly be Hawaiian, living with the earth, not on it. His machete was resting harmlessly at his side, Nancy noticed, and any fear she'd had of him was gone. Luke had a rock-solid quality that Nancy had seldom encountered before. I'm supposed to go to the end of this trail, she told him. Come with me. I'll explain as we go. He followed her and she confided the plan to him. Luke nodded approvingly. How many of you are there? He asked. 5, Nancy said. It is a good plan, Luke said. They had reached the trail's end. May I have my flashlight back, please? Nancy asked. Sure, Luke said, handing it to her. Nancy flashed her light and 3 lights blinked back out of the darkness. The moon was just rising, casting a glow on the tiled roof of the mausoleum. Nancy had a perfect view of the tomb and the surrounding area. Everyone's in place and ready. Now we wait, Nancy said, dropping to the ground next to a giant fiddlehead fern. What are those yellow flowers? Why are you carrying them? They looked like the flowers she and George had seen earlier at the scene of the murder. They are the flowers of the mau plant, he told her, a native plant. But like so many native Hawaiian things, they are being destroyed by foreign invaders. Nancy couldn't help thinking of Rachel Maxon when she talked about the big corporations and the changes they brought. It's not just plants that are being destroyed, she said sympathetically. Luke settled on the ground next to her. My islands are so beautiful, Nancy, he said, scooting closer to her, but they are becoming more and more false. Soon the spirits of our ancestors who walk at night will not recognize their homeland, and now our treasure is being plundered, too. These thieves steal the wealth of all the people. Nancy thought of Anna Saleo speaking about Ramitanga and the way he had exploited the Torcasian islands. We're going to stop the thieves, Luke, she said quietly. We're going to do everything in our power to find your treasures and return them to you. My people have mystic weapons, weapons the explorer cannot see. Though she didn't understand him, his heartfelt commitment inspired Nancy. The two sat in silence for a time. Then Luke handed Nancy a flower. To some, this is a simple plant, and no more. But the wise man sees the power in it. Tell me, Nancy asked, why are you carrying them? Because here in the Nuuanu Valley is one of the few places left where the mau grows. I carefully harvest them, taking only as many as my father needs so he can study them to try to save them. Your father lives on Niihau too? Nancy asked. Yes, he is a big man there. Big man? Joe had overheard Harry Leong say those same words. What do you mean by that exactly? Nancy asked. Kame Kilauea, my father, is a medicine man and shaman. People around the world know him as a man of great power and intelligence. Big Island Mike. Scientists seek his wisdom about healing plants and trees. And he's trying to save the mau, Nancy said, understanding. Just then, Nancy heard the sound of tires turning on the dirt road below. Someone's here, Nancy whispered, alert and ready. She saw a long black car riding slowly down the main drive. In the moonlight from a distance, it appeared to be an old Lincoln Continental with the headlights doused. That must be them, Nancy whispered. Luke's hand went to the hilt of his machete. Nancy watched the car pull up. The doors opened and 3 masked figures emerged, silhouetted by the interior lights. Nancy watched as the 3 people crept stealthily toward the entrance. Her heart pounding, she told herself to remain calm. Joe would be calling the police any second now. Ayah! Nancy froze in shock as Luke jumped up from beside her and unleashed a blood-curdling yell. Before she could stop him, he had bolted from their hiding place, pushed through the few trees around them, and was racing across the lawn in the moonlight. Stop! He shrieked, heading straight for the thieves. Stop! Stop! Luke, no! Nancy yelled, but it was too late. Luke Kilauea was ruining everything. End of chapter 7. Yeah, it's spelled like that. I'm saying it ni hao, but it's like, isn't that how you say like hello in Chinese? So I feel like silly saying it that way because maybe it's different, but maybe it's the same. I don't know. Nancy's misunderstanding it. Little Island Luke. Well, his father is Big Island Mike. He said he was a big man. Thank you for claps. Sort of. Ni hao is definitely German. Right. Hi, Disney. Is it like... Since it... Like, Hawaii, it's like the eyes are separated at the end of Hawaii, so would it be like Ni'i Hao? Ni'i Hao? I don't know. I'm trying too hard. Okay. Trying to stay nice and hydrated between chapters. In Mandarin, the ni hao is the same sound in terms of letters, but because Mandarin uses tones, it's pronounced a certain way. I got you. I'm not sure if Hawaiian uses tones. I'm gonna say ni hao and apologize to anybody listening that knows how it's supposed to be said and it's different than that. I promise I'm not trying to be incorrect. I'm just uneducated. Okay. Chapter 8. As Luke's scream pierced the quiet night, other cries rose to meet it. The masked thieves shouted as they scrambled back toward their car. Nancy's friends called out to one another, the beams from their flashlights bobbing wildly as they tore across the lawn. Nancy could tell in an instant that they'd never get to the thieves or Luke in time. His machete raised high, Luke flew toward the three intruders. Two made it into the car, the third almost in. "They're getting away!" Joe's voice rang out as the car's engine roared to life. It screeched into reverse. Flashlights were dropped as everyone ran to dodge the careening vehicle. The third thief leapt for the car as the driver changed to a forward gear and managed to pull open the back door. As he was jumping in, Luke launched himself and grabbed a leg. "Yow!" roared the masked figure. The voice sounded like a man's to Nancy. The car bucked into gear. The third thief clutched the door with Luke dangling from his leg. Finally, Luke couldn't hold on any longer. The car dragged the still screaming thief 20 yards more before it stopped so he could throw himself in. The car then roared off into the night. They all got up and dusted themselves off. After retrieving their flashlights, they met near the mausoleum. Joe, who was holding Luke's machete, shone his flashlight into Luke's face. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And why did you ruin our stakeout like that?" "Joe!" Nancy cried. "He's a friend." Confused, Joe stopped. "I'm sorry," Luke said softly. "I thought I could capture them." "Even if you had caught up to them, that wouldn't have helped. They hadn't committed the crime yet. What were you going to do with them?" I don't know," Luke said. "I guess I should have thought first." "I guess you should have," Joe echoed bitterly. "By the way, who are you?" "I told you, Joe," Nancy said. "He's a friend. I met him on the trail. His name is Luke Kilauea." "And what's he doing here?" Joe demanded. "I was here for the same reason you are," Luke said passionately. He told them what he'd told Nancy. Nancy could tell that Joe didn't believe a word Luke said. Bess came forward, studying Luke in the light from all the flashlights. "He looks innocent to me." "Everybody looks innocent to you, Bess," Joe said. Well, he isn't wearing black clothes and a mask like those other three were, George pointed out, and he did try to stop them. He could have been their lookout, Joe said hotly. If he wasn't, he should have been. We did a great job of warning them. We didn't even get a chance to phone for help. Listen, I know you're upset, Nancy said to Frank and Joe, but I think Luke was trying to help, and he may be able to help us solve that murder at the hotel. He knows about the flowers that were under the body. Luke is a native Hawaiian. His father is Kame Kilauea, a shaman who works with plants. Come to Niihau and see for yourself. I invite you all, Luke said, clearly trying to soothe the angry feelings he'd provoked. Please, come as my guests. Great, Joe muttered angrily. Just great. We'd better go home, George suggested. Do you have a car, Luke? My motorbike is hidden in the bushes, he replied. I'm staying with some relatives on Oahu in a little town called Maili. It's north of Honolulu. After Nancy got a number where she could reach him, she and the others headed back to their hotels. Do you think they'll try to hit the mausoleum again, or will they island hop like they were planning? Frank asked out loud. Beats me, Joe said. If they're island hopping, how do we find out where? He sounded really down. Nancy and the girls remained silent. They knew how badly Frank and Joe must have felt. They'd lost an important chance.
Dang, if that don't beat off. I've read every single book that gal's ever written.
Bookstream and not in the middle of the night.
Maybe their last chance to crack the case wide open. You know, I'm not even sure those people were Heather, Harry, and Willie, Joe said. It was so dark, they had those stupid masks on. He banged a fist against the dashboard of the car. Why did that guy have to yell? I don't know what to say, Frank muttered. Whether Luke was in on it or not, it comes down to the same thing. We blew it bad. Without much conversation, the Hardys drove back to the Grand Hawaiian. See you tomorrow, Frank said as he and Joe drove off. Can I finally get some dinner? Bess asked as they stepped into the pink marble lobby. Definitely, George agreed. I'm hungry myself. Let's not take the time to change. I have to check in with my dad, Nancy told them, so I'll meet you in a couple of minutes, but go ahead and order me some Thai noodles, okay? And Bess, if my dish comes before I get there, hands off. Are you suggesting that I would steal your food? Bess retorted in mock insult. Her tendency to take a generous taste of her friends' dinners was legendary. Watch her, George, Nancy ordered as she hurried for the elevators. When she arrived at her father's room, she found him sitting with Rachel Maxon. A bunch of papers was spread out on the coffee table in front of them. Hi, Nancy said. How's your stomach, Rachel? You look a lot better. Oh, I am, Rachel said with a smile. Your father has a very restorative effect on me, I guess. She and Carson gave each other a warm look. Nan, what's this I hear about your finding a dead body? I'm worried about you. Her father's face was concerned. I'm fine, Dad, Nancy assured him. Then she explained all that had happened. I see. And what about tonight? Where were you? He's asked, giving her a penetrating look. I was out with the Hardys. Bess and George were there too. We went for a drive. Well, that was true, at least as far as it went. Later, when they were alone, she'd tell him where she'd been and why. We even met a native Hawaiian who invited us to visit Niihau, she said, changing the subject. Niihau? Carson asked. It's a small private island, Carson, west of Kauai, Rachel told him. I have a very distinct relative who manages the macadamia nut plantation there. Who invited you, Nancy? Luke Kilauea, Nancy said. As she spoke, she watched Rachel's face closely. Do you know him? She asked. I know his father, Kame Kilauea, Rachel said. Anyone who's lived here all her life knows Big Man Kame. Big Island Mike. He loves this land, and he's worked tirelessly to preserve our heritage. Hey, Carson interrupted with a smile. We were going to take a walk, remember? Rachel nodded and said, Give me a few minutes to get a sweater. I'll meet you in the lobby. After Rachel had left, Nancy said, She's very good looking, Dad. She's happy tonight because we managed to work out a new payment schedule for her taxes, Carson said. She seems pretty happy to be with you, Nancy pointed out. She's very sweet, Nancy, her father said, but I don't really know her very well. I just want you to know that whatever makes you happy is fine with me, 'cause you're the best, Nancy said. Well, it runs in the family, Carson said with a soft smile, squeezing her hand and releasing it. Gosh, I almost forgot. Bess and George are waiting for me to eat. You mean you haven't eaten yet? Carson asked, straightening some of the papers in front of him. We got sidetracked, Nancy admitted. She hoped her father wouldn't ask any more, and fortunately he didn't. I'll ride down with you, he volunteered. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor, and Anna Saleo stepped inside. Miss Saleo, I'm Nancy Drew, Nancy said excitedly, shaking the woman's slender hand. Your speech last night was so inspiring. I promised myself to read up on Ramitanga, everything I could get my hands on. I'm Carson Drew, Nancy's father broke in. My daughter's a detective. Really? Anna Saleo seemed genuinely impressed. And so young. My. Well, I'm sorry to say we need an entire army of detectives to figure out how Tonga gets money out of his European bank accounts. One source in Europe tells me our money is there and that Tonga has been drawing on it. He does it all without leaving here. Of that we're sure too. I'm shocked that your government continues to support him. I sent a fax to my senator this afternoon, Carson said. Miss Saleo turned to him gratefully. If more of you would do that, it would help. I'm sure of it. Quite a woman, Carson remarked after they parted at the lobby. She sure is, Nancy agreed, and I'd hate it if she went back to the Turquesas empty-handed. Bleh. Now don't get involved in that case too, he said, warning her. Okay, I won't, Nancy said with her fingers crossed behind her back. Nancy said goodnight to her father and turned to enter the cafe. Bess, Marvin, put that fork down this instant, Nancy said, sweeping toward the table where Bess and George sat waiting for their dinner. The delicate scent of lemongrass drifting up from the pile of thin rice noodles made Nancy's mouth water. I was only going to take a taste, Bess protested, but Nancy knew otherwise. Just in the nick of time, George said as her dinner and Bess's were put on the table. For a few minutes, all talking stopped as the three hungry girls ate their fill. What a day, George said eventually. I'm exhausted, and I want to go to bed early. Me too, Bess agreed. The surfing contest starts at 8 on Makaha Beach. As for Nancy, she planned on calling Luke first thing in the morning. She'd already decided to accept his invitation to visit Niihau, tomorrow if possible. She hoped to learn more about Big Man Kame. As soon as she had finished eating, the three friends headed upstairs to their beds. Night, everyone, George said sleepily as she slithered under the thin cotton blanket. Good night, Bess answered with a yawn, turning off the light by her bed. Soon George and Bess were breathing steadily. Too full of questions, Nancy adjusted her pillow and thought. Her mind flitted from the evening's adventure to the dead man in the parking garage to her father and Rachel Maxon sitting so cozily on the couch together, to Anna Salea shaking her hand saying her country needed people like Nancy. Then there was Luke sitting in the lush greenery telling her about old Hawaii and his mystic secrets. What a day. Her mind a jumble, Nancy felt her body get heavier and sink into the clean sheets. She could feel the dreams coming on fast. Then she heard it, a sound that did not belong in her dreams. The sound of a doorknob clicking as it was turned. Then the door slowly creaked open. The door into their living room. Holding her breath, Nancy propped herself up to check on Bess and George, who were fast asleep. Who was out there? End of chapter 8. Niihau. Niihau. Okay, Niihau. I was right about the... Okay. Niihau. I'll try to remember that for future readings. So sleepy. You know what I do when I'm sleepy? I sleep. Who am I? Who am I? A friend. Hi, G. Coming back after your trolling, I see I had to switch accounts. Yeah. My name in this book would be Dr. Dr. Mayo. Hi, Moocher. Thank you for subbing for 82 months. House of Condiments. Oh, did you hurt your arm, Coco? I didn't know. Coco has at least one arm. I mean, how you gonna play Nancy Drew without at least one arm? It's always nice to tell people I have at least 10 toes. Nice. CW Nancy Dad would get with that woman. Oh, man. Carson can't squeeze her hand. He's like a VeggieTales character, the golf ball. 3-stream watch streak. That's nice. Hype. That's like all of the streams in 2024. Yeah. Lying to your father's okay if you cross your fingies. I will say, I just saved my game, Moocher, don't worry. Why did Nancy yell at Bess? Because she told Bess not to eat her noodles if they came before she got back to the table. Because she wanted to go fill in her dad. And Bess was like, I won't. And then as Nancy was approaching the table, she saw Bess going for the noodles. Yeehaw! Oh, I understand, Coco. Use your face to poorly guide the mouse. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who have, like, accessibility, like, needs. And they probably do have, like, a different accommodations to play, so. So I'm sure it is possible, actually. Alright, we've been live for 45 minutes already, wow. We're only this far. We've only read this much. Doesn't it seem like I've been reading a lot more than that? This is one of the chunkier, super mysteries, though, I think. And I got this... this is not a notebook. This is a bookmark. I got this bookmark in this book when I ordered it off of Thrift Books, I believe. So, I don't know if that's a thing they do. They just give you a free bookmark. I still remember seeing a documentary about a blind guy playing World of Warcraft. That's crazy. You need to go brrr. There's that guy who had the neuron chip implanted in his brain, and so far he's used it to play like Slay the Spire entirely with his mind. That's wild and also kind of scary. That's actually kind of scary. Because it's like, could that guy, like, walk up to my laptop and, like, hack it? And, like, see all my personal stuff in his brain? I don't know how it works. I have a One Piece bookmark in my Benedict Society book. Best bookmark. I have, Sarah got me a bookmark for, I think it was my birthday. I have it in my, I'm currently reading Ballad of Songbird and Snakes as well. But it's like a corner bookmark, and isn't it cute? So, I've been using that as well. I finished the first... I read them years ago, like when they first got, when they first were released. Like, I read them before the movies were out, and I liked them. And I'm just very behind on reading now, so I'm just now getting to the prequel. And I haven't watched the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes movie yet, because I want to finish the book first, but... Yeah, I haven't read, the Hunger Games, like, on stream or anything. I just read them years ago. And hello, by the way. I'm trying to read them in Spanish, but I'm not a native Spanish speaker, so it's difficult. Oh, I imagine that would be very difficult. Okay, shall we move on? I'm assuming that the music has been okay, because nobody has told me otherwise, so... Cool beans. Awesome. Yeah, the name of this book is Tropic of Fear. And it's a Nancy Drew Hardy Boys mystery. Alright, Chapter 9. Her heart pounding wildly, Nancy listened to someone move through the suite sitting room. One of the feet sounded as if it was dragging. Did the person have a limp? Closer and closer the person moved across the carpeting. Swallowing hard, Nancy made one desperate play. "Hello, security?" she said softly, but loud enough for the person to hear. "There's an intruder in suite 425. You'll be right up? Oh, thank you." The phone was across the bedroom next to Bess, and Nancy just hoped the intruder wouldn't call her bluff. A few seconds later, the front door squeaked open again, and the intruder retreated. Her plan had worked. Instantly, Nancy was out of bed, running from the bedroom to the outer room of the suite. She threw the door open and peered out. A man with a limp was rushing down the hall toward the elevator. Before Nancy could tell anything else about him, the elevator doors swallowed him up. Examining the door on The lock on her door, she detected no damage. Could the visitor work at the hotel? This was the second time someone had gotten into one of their rooms and the electronic card's security system had been broken. While Bess and George continued to sleep peacefully, Nancy checked the outer room. The coat closet door was open, and George's Willow Beach bag had been overturned. Once again, Nancy surmised, the intruder had come for something. But what? Had he found it? If he hadn't, would he be back again? That thought shot through Nancy like an electric current. Switching off the light, she returned to the darkened bedroom and slipped back into bed. There was no sense alarming Bess and George. The intruder would not be back that night, Nancy was sure. When the first light came through the window, Nancy dialed Rachel's suite. "Sorry to call you so early, but I need to see you right away," she said quietly because her friends were still asleep. "Of course, Nancy," Rachel replied. "Come to my suite. It's number 105 next to my office." Nancy hurried downstairs where Rachel greeted her in a blue silk robe pulled tight at the waist. "Twice in 2 days," she gasped after Nancy told her about the intruder. "I'd better get my security chief in here." Picking up the phone, she tapped a couple of digits. "Send Johnny Leong to 105 right away." Leong. That name was familiar. Harry Leong was one of the Hardys' prime suspects in the thefts, Nancy recalled. "How common a name is Leong here in Hawaii?" Nancy asked. "Fairly common," Rachel answered. "Why, do you know somebody by that name?" Before Nancy could answer, a knock interrupted them. "Johnny, come in," Rachel said, pulling the door open. Nancy watched as a thin, nervous-looking man made his way inside, limping. "There's been another break-in," Rachel explained, giving him the details. "Naturally, I'm very upset about it. Extremely upset. In both cases, the card code system failed completely. You promised me that system was the very best." The security chief shot her a hard look. "Are you saying I had something to do with the break-ins?" he challenged. "Look, Johnny, all I know is that hotel security is your responsibility," Rachel replied wearily. "As of today, I'm suspending you until I find out what's going on around here. Sorry, but I have to." Johnny Leong gave her a faintly amused look, then muttered, "Whatever you feel's best." "I think it would be best for you to clear your desk today and not come back until further notice." "Fine," Johnny Leong said. He cast a sidelong glance at Nancy and left the room. "This is the one part of being an executive that I really don't like," Rachel said. "But I won't feel comfortable with him around, not knowing what's happening. Nancy, I promised to look into this matter." "Are you okay?" Nancy asked. "I'll be fine," Rachel said, rubbing her midsection. "Is he from around here?" Nancy asked. "His father was from the Torquesas, and his mother was Hawaiian," Rachel said. "He's been my security chief for about 6 months now." "I hope you have better luck with your next security chief," Nancy said, getting up to leave. After Nancy said goodbye, she walked to the lobby and called Luke to make arrangements to visit Ni'ihau. He said he couldn't join them, but insisted they go anyway. After Nancy hung up, she headed to the hotel cafe. George and Bess were up and helping themselves to the exotic fruits and oversized muffins that made up the breakfast buffet. "Hi guys," Nancy said, joining them. "How'd you sleep?" "Great," Bess smiled. "How about you?" "Do you really want to know?" Nancy began. With a wry grin, she told them what they'd missed. "You are kidding," George said, astonished to learn about the intruder. "We slept through all that?" "We said we were exhausted," Bess put in. "I guess we were right." "I've just lost my appetite," George said, pushing her half-eaten breakfast away. "I'll be glad to get off this island today. Hopefully it'll be more peaceful on Ni'ihau." "Hey, what about me?" Bess said. "I'm staying here, remember?" "Willie will take care of you, Bess," George teased. "Yeah," Nancy added with a twinkle in her eye. "Try to get a full confession out of him about the art thefts while you're at it." Bess rolled her eyes and shook her head. "I'm telling you, Willie's not involved in these thefts. The only thing he's interested in is surfing." "Speaking of Willie, there he is," George murmured, pointing to the veranda that led to the cafe. "I think he's looking for you, Bess." Bess swung around and a giant smile came over her face. "Willie," she waved, "over here." As the surfer took steps toward them, Nancy let out a gasp. Willie was limping. "What happened to your foot?" Bess asked as he reached their table. "Not much," he said. "I twisted my ankle yesterday surfing." "I don't remember you limping yesterday," Nancy pressed. "It stiffened up last night," Willie said flatly. Then he turned to Bess and cocked his head. "Bess, could we talk in private?" "Sure," Bess said. "Is something wrong?" She stood up and joined him, and they walked out of earshot. A few minutes later, Bess was heading back to the table, and Willie was leaving the restaurant. His hands were deep in the pockets of his baggy shorts. "What nerve!" Bess said hotly. "You know, I hate to say it, but Joe Hardy was right. Willie Brannigan is a jerk." "What happened, Bess?" Nancy asked. "He said he doesn't want me to come to the contest today," Bess said, tears welling up in her eyes. "He said it makes him nervous when I'm there." "Nervous?" George repeated in disbelief. That's weird. I don't believe it, Bess said. After all, I was there yesterday and he won, right? Maybe he has another girl coming today. Poor Bess, George said sympathetically. I know you really liked him too. Wait a minute, Bess shot back defensively. I didn't like him that much. Nancy had to smile at her friend's resilience. No guy could ever get Bess down for long. Want to come with us to Niihau, Bess? I called Luke and we're visiting his dad today. Of course I'm coming, Bess said, reaching for her papaya drink. I'd much rather go to a new island than hang out at some dumb surfing contest. Surfing is boring. Surfing is boring? What's this I hear? Came Frank Hardy's voice as he and Joe approached the table. Is it true, Joe? Surfing is boring? Maybe for the spectators, Joe said with a smile as he pulled up a chair from an empty table and sat down. How is everyone this morning? You seem pretty cheerful, Joe, Nancy observed. You were kind of down last night. Hey, it's a brand new day, Joe said. Things can only get better. How about you guys? There was a second of silence and then Nancy volunteered. Our room was broken into by a man with a limp. Joe let out a low whistle while Nancy filled the Hardys in. When he heard the part about Johnny Leong, Frank folded his arms. Leong, huh? I wonder if there's a connection to Harry. You say he limped? Yes, but wait until you hear this, George put in. Willie Brannigan was also limping today. Maybe it was Willie's leg Luke grabbed last night, Bess suggested. Wait a minute, Bess, Joe said. You're mixing up two cases. The break-ins at your suite are probably connected to the murder, remember, not the thefts? Nancy drummed her fingers on the tabletop. Unless they're connected in a way we don't understand yet, she said. That thought stopped their conversation cold. Frank leaned in close to speak. Well, one thing's for sure. We'd better stay alert today. If the thieves are Heather, Harry, and Willie, or anyone, actually, they know we're after them. And obviously, someone is after the three of you because they think you have something that's important to them. What are you girls doing today? Joe asked. We're going to Niihau to meet with Luke's father, Nancy told him. Is Luke going to be there? George asked. No, Nancy replied. He has to stay on Oahu. I hope he isn't doing any snooping on his own. He's not very good at it. Anyway, he told me how to get to Niihau. Speaking of which, we'd better get going. We've got a plane to catch. After they said their goodbyes, Nancy and her friends hurried to their Jeep in the underground parking lot. A barrier of bright yellow plastic tape surrounded the area where the dead man had been found. On the ground, an outline of smudged white chalk indicated where the corpse had fallen. Oh, that gives me the creeps, Bess said. Driving out of the lot onto the bright Hawaiian sun had a cheering effect on them all. Look at that sky, George said dreamily. It's a beautiful day. Seems like every day is beautiful in Hawaii, Nancy agreed. At the airport, they purchased tickets for their short flight. At the departure gate, a uniformed man came and introduced himself with a jaunty smile. Hi there, girls. I'm Captain Wingate. You're off to Niihau, eh? Great place. What made you decide to go there? We want to find out about these weird yellow... Bess began, but Nancy deftly cut her off. Sunsets. Our friends told us that they're better on Niihau than anywhere else in Hawaii. Wingate seemed a little confused by Nancy's strange response, but he smiled broadly nevertheless. Well, not many tourists get to Niihau, unless they've got a particular reason for going. The captain seemed to be waiting for them to volunteer more. When they didn't, he said, We'll be flying in a 6-seater today. You'll be my only passengers. Lucky for me. Again, the captain waited, and again the girls were quiet. Finally, he walked away. See you on board, he called back over his shoulder. 15 minutes, okay? I don't trust that guy, George said. Me neither, Bess added. That makes 3 of us, Nancy agreed. Excuse me, you two, she told her friends, following a hunch and taking off after the pilot. Which way had he gone? Glancing toward the payphones, Nancy didn't see the pilot. She walked down the hallway a little farther, then turned down a quiet side corridor with several unmarked doors on either side. Hearing the pilot's voice behind one of them, she put her ear to the door. She couldn't make out all the words, but she could tell that there was another man in the room. I'm trying, the captain was saying. Nancy heard chairs being scraped back as the pilot said, See you this afternoon. Backing away from the door, Nancy crossed the hall to the ladies' room and opened it. She stayed in the doorway and peered out around the frame. When the captain emerged from the room with another man, Nancy blinked hard. Wingate's companion was someone she recognized. In fact, she had met him for the first time that very morning. Johnny Leong. Nancy swallowed hard, suddenly worried about herself and her friends. Was there going to be trouble on their flight or their visit to Niihau? End of chapter 9. Didn't know Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys do collabs. They do many collabs, actually. The Neuralink guy's quadriplegic, so it's cool. He can play stuff like RuneScape and Slay the Spire, and apparently beat his pals in online games too. I imagine it would need to be granted access to a computer to utilize it, so it isn't like he can come by and instantly access your laptop or something. But imagine if he could hack the mainframe with his mind. I mean, I guess it's possible now, though he seems quite content for now, just slaying spires. True. He could probably still beat me in Fortnite, probably. Nothing like hearing this story play out and just imagining a fur walking. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Hello, future YouTube listeners. I hope you're having a good day. Thanks, CJ. Use a real one. We are 52 minutes in. He ain't got that far, yeah. What is with this read stream? 40 minutes of reading. 53 minutes and no pictures? Can you stop taking breaks and reading the chat? Horrible editing. Literally the kind of the kind of comments I get on YouTube. Literally. Nancy Drew, why aren't you reading A Series of Unfortunate Events again, but better to my specific guidelines? Today is my birthday, even though they said that on another comment a week ago. I do get those too. I also get, I got one recently that was like, oh, we're the same age. And it was like a comment I had said about my age like 7 years ago. And I'm like, well, actually, we aren't anymore. Unless they did the math themselves and actually are my age. I don't know. If people are spectating, aren't they awaiting what they're watching? So they wouldn't generally be bored. I mean, I guess, unless they didn't want to be there in the first place. Don't play with your hair, the oil in your finger. You know, I remember that comment too. It's like... It was when it was like, you stumbled over your words at this specific time mark. Super unprofessional. Bro. If you want me to record a professional audiobook, it would not be live, and I would edit everything, and it would take me lots of time. I'm not doing all of that work, I'm sorry. He's just chilling in Hawaii after appearing to choke slam The Rock. Yeah. Don't drink your drink with a spoon in it. You'll poke your eye out. Thanks, Brenda. Clearly, I'm 3 years old. It'd be one thing if you were like, I'm so clumsy, and I tend to poke myself with straws and things, and then you were like, you know, like, it'd be one thing if, like, it had happened, you know, because then it would kind of be, like, funny. Like, it'd be, like, a little tease. Like, a little joshin'. But if it's just, like, out of nowhere... And also, how aggressively are you drinking that your spoon is going to completely poke your eyeball out? Thanks for the claps. What a guy, that CJ. If only CJ was here. I just never age. I mean, I hope that's true. I do notice a few I have noticed a few changes over the years. I feel like it's harder for me to keep my eye bags unswollen. That's a harder thing for me now, but we found Le Fountain of Youth. Okay. I'm gonna try to go... I don't know how long the next couple chapters are, but... I'd like to maybe get 2 more done. Maybe more. I don't know. I'm feeling pretty good right now. I got an adult beverage at a restaurant recently. I went to dinner with my mom. I just ordered 1 cocktail, and she didn't card me, and I was like, oh no. Oh no! What does it mean? But anyway, that's just a little fun tidbit. I'm at least 10% gray hair now. Only 10%? Just kidding. The sweet hug of the touch of gray. That's so poetic. Could mean she's a bad worker and wants to be cool. Yeah, I don't know. That can get you fined and in jail. So I don't know. Alright, moving on. Chapter 10. Nancy went back to the gate where Bess and George were waiting. Wingate soon joined them and led them across the asphalt to the small plane they'd be traveling in. It's so tiny, Bess said nervously, like a car with wings. Just climb in, Bess, George said. Soon Honolulu lay below them with the deep blue Pacific lapping at its shore. I love it, George shouted over the roar of the small engine. You can see everything from up here. Nancy was only half aware of the view. She was a lot more concerned about why Leong had been meeting with the pilot and if it had anything to do with the case. Look up ahead on your left. We'll be coming past Chinaman's hat, the captain shouted. It's a rock formation in the water. See it? Nancy peered out and saw the huge formation set like an onyx rock in the bright sea. They passed over Oahu and crossed more water to another island. That must be Kauai? Nancy volunteered. They call it the Green Island. I can see why, shouted Bess, staring at the verdant mountaintops. It rains there a lot, the captain explained loudly. In fact, the northwest coast is one of the wettest spots on Earth. Close to the coast of Kauai, another smaller island came into view. Is that Niihau? George yelled. Yes, indeed, he returned. That's Niihau, the forgotten Hawaiian island, the one most tourists don't even know about. Niihau, the sacred island, Nancy murmured quietly, thinking of Luke and his faith in the ways of his people. Only George heard her. Wingate was busy navigating, and Bess's nose was pressed against the window on the other side of the craft. I see a field of pink, she cried happily. What is it? That's an orchid farm, the pilot told her. Here on Niihau, the people don't want any polluting industries, so they grow nuts, taro plant, and flowers. Take a deep breath, because I'm going to bring this baby down. After landing at the small airstrip, Wingate told them to be back at 5 for the return trip. And please don't be late, the pilot said. Just before we took off, a man hired me for a private flight at 7. Nancy realized that Leong must have hired him, but it seemed too coincidental that he'd shown up at the exact same time as Nancy and her friends. The girls left the small airport building and stepped out into the balmy air. Kame is going to meet us, Nancy told her friends. But instead, a girl of about 6 ran up to them. In her hands were 3 glorious red garlands of hibiscus flowers. She handed one to each of them. Thank you, Nancy told her warmly. Grandfather said walk with me, she said confidently, taking Nancy by the hand. My name is Callie. Your grandfather is Kame Kilauea? Nancy asked, smiling down at Callie. Yes. The girl nodded and led them away from the airport down a narrow, unpaved road. Above them, puffy white clouds dotted the sky. The air is so great here, George said, breathing deeply. Bess reached down and picked up a fallen hibiscus blossom, which she put behind her ear. Where does your grandfather live? Is it far? The little girl didn't answer. She kept walking, holding Nancy's hand tightly. As they neared a small cement building with the words General Supplies stenciled on it, a man of about 50 emerged from inside, carrying a grocery bag. His large frame carried a considerable amount of fat, and he wore a garland of small shells around his neck. Aloha, and welcome to our island, he said, stepping forward to greet Nancy and her friends. I am Kame Kilauea, and I'm very grateful for your help in trying to save our Hawaiian treasures. I offer my sincere thanks. Come. He ushered them to his car, an old sedan dating from the 1970s. The group piled in, and within 5 minutes they pulled up in front of a clapboard house surrounded by palm trees and thick bougainvillea bushes. Callie ran off to play behind the house. Craning her neck, Nancy noticed an immense greenhouse there. Later I'll show you my laboratory, he said, but first you must meet my wife. She's waiting in the garden. Come. He led the girls around the far side of the house. There, Nancy's eyes were caught by a large pile of stones about the size of a small teepee. What's that? She asked curiously. Some of the stones she noticed were carved with strange symbols. This, my child, is an altar. It was built by my people long ago. The rocks stand for the force of nature, which my people strive to obey. Yes, Coco. It's fascinating, George said. May I touch it? Yes, the old man answered with a laugh. There is no distance between us and our gods. We may touch and feel them freely. Do people still worship at these altars? Nancy asked. Very few, came Kame's sad answer. Many have forgotten the old ways. Most altars have gone to ruin. These symbols are beautiful, George said, but what do they mean? Kame rubbed his fingers over a set of markings etched in one of the stones on the altar. These are petroglyphs. Our ancestors carved their prayers into rock so they would be heard forever. Their meaning is of great importance. The land is sacred, he added in a near whisper. You can see these markings throughout the islands, at altars and temples, on the faces of cliffs, at all the holy places where Pele is worshipped. I've heard of Pele. She's the goddess of fire, isn't she? Bess asked. Pele, Kame told her, rules from the inside of the earth. She rules the volcanoes. My people believe that she will free the people from false values and take revenge on those who harm the earth. When he spoke, the man's dark eyes shone. His deep convictions and passions for nature made him appear young again. He led them past the altar to the back of the house. A petite woman with streaks of white in her jet-black hair was kneeling beside a bed of flowering herbs. She wore a loose cotton dress covered with painted designs. This is my Tika, Kame said with a smile. Aloha, she said, smiling warmly as they introduced themselves. Tika stood and nodded, pointing to a small table, the trowel still in her hand. Come, we have mangoes from our tree and fresh poi. Poi? Bess repeated. Nancy gave her a sharp look. Sounds delicious, Bess added, getting the message. It's been the staff of life of our people for ages, Kame explained, laughing. It's made from taro root. If you don't like it, please don't eat it. Many of our guests say it takes getting used to. Nancy saw a small outdoor table that had been set up for them. 5 cloth napkins were set inside 5 shallow wooden bowls. In the center of the table was an array of fruit and bread. As a bird sang nearby, Kame and Tika asked the girls about the impressions of Hawaii. Luke's parents were relaxed and easy to be with. It was the perfect lunch in the perfect garden, Nancy thought, savoring more of the succulent fruit. When they finished eating, Nancy turned to big man Kame. What can you tell me about the Mao plant? She asked. I can do more than tell. I can show you this plant. Turning to Tika, he grinned mischievously. If my wife will generously clean the table now, I will do so tonight at supper. Tika nodded playfully, and Kame led the girls into his greenhouse. The humid air inside was filled with the earthy, rich scent of flowers and loam. A long, low table was piled waist-high with leafy dark green plants, many in brilliant golden flower. Mao. All Mao, he said, indicating the plants with his arm. My people believe the flower cools the fire of the body. We make a tea from it that tastes bitter but soothes the digestion. Science confirms our mystic knowledge. Many think the Mao flower will soon offer an important defense against gastritis and other stomach ailments. I read a newspaper article about another plant with healing power, Bess said. The article said 25% of all modern drugs come from plants. Kame nodded. Many, many plants have healing powers, child. The Creator is wise, but man is sometimes foolish. He has built roads and houses on the land where the Mao used to grow. There are very few left. You seem to have quite a lot of them here, Nancy noted. What do you do with them? I plant the seeds and send the blossoms to Switzerland, Kame told her, walking over to a small wooden desk on the far end of the greenhouse. There, European scientists are learning to extract their power. When Kame reached down to pick up a packing envelope to show Nancy, she caught her breath. The mailer was identical to the one George had found by the dead man. May I see that? She asked, walking over to him and examining the large yellow address label. In deep purple ink it read, from Kilauea Research Center, Niihau, Hawaii. The label also had a few petroglyph symbols like the ones Kame had shown them on the altar. This mailer is addressed to a company called Future Health of Zurich, but the address is a post office box in Honolulu, Nancy noted, memorizing the box number, 1119. Why would a Swiss institute have a Honolulu address? Kame shrugged. I suppose they ship from there. Haven't you ever met them? Nancy asked. No, they contacted me by mail after my work was shown in the news, Kame answered. I do not travel to Oahu. From what they said, it seems they are doing good work. Leaving the greenhouse, the man turned to his guests. Now I must ask you a favor. My grandchildren, Luke's nieces and nephews, have prepared an entertainment for you. Will you come hear them sing and watch them dance? That would be fantastic, Bess said. Nancy nodded absent-mindedly. How could one of Kame's mailers have gotten to the scene of the murder, she wondered. Could Kame be a big man in more than just medicine and healing plants? Frank Hardy spread more turquoise goo over his nose. Thank goodness for sunblock, he thought. Without it, he'd resemble a cooked lobster. He'd been out in the hot sun for over 6 hours, supposedly watching the surfing contest. His attention, in fact, had been on Willie Brannigan, Heather Farwell, and Harry Leong. Willie was sitting out the competition, his ankle wrapped in an orange neon bandage. All day, he'd flirted with the girls, every so often calling out friendly insults to the other surfers, especially Wipeout Keene. Willie's cracks were getting to Joe, Frank noticed. His brother kept signing on for more and more surf time, even though he wasn't performing very well. Take it easy out there, Frank had warned him earlier. We need you in one piece. Joe's whole intent seemed to be to show Willie he could surf with the best. Just then he was out there fighting another wave. Hi, came a sweet voice next to Frank's ear. He turned and saw Heather Farwell's sharp blue eyes smiling at him. Can I talk to you? All day Heather had been throwing Frank smiles and coy looks, but he had ignored them. Go ahead, he said with a shrug. Heather slid onto the sand next to Frank and let out a sigh. I'm really, really sorry about what happened when we were at Surf Riders. That's nice of you, Frank said flatly. Why don't you believe me? She asked, pouting. Maybe it was instinct that made Frank turn around, or maybe he figured she was wasting his time on purpose. Sure enough, there were Willie and Harry across the road, heading for the parking lot. Heather was attempting to distract him. I want to explain about the other day, she said. Well, thought Frank, that should be interesting, except that he had to get out of here right then and go after the other two. How about a little later, Frank said, getting to his feet. Right now I've got to pick up a pizza. Heather showed surprise at that one. See you later, he added with a little wave. Make sure no one walks off with my towel, okay? Before she could object, Frank was gone. Within 10 minutes he was on the highway, 2 cars behind Harry. It was an easy tail job. The coast road had no turnoffs for at least 7 miles, and there was just enough traffic to cover him. Whoa, Frank murmured when Harry turned off at the Honolulu airport sign. What was that all about? What if Harry and Willie were going to meet Nancy, Bess, and George? If they were, it wasn't likely to be a friendly reception. Frank watched as Willie and Harry approached a Jeep and stopped. Frank parked and slid out. After closing his door as quietly as he could, he edged closer for a better look. Willie stood and scanned the parking lot, making sure nobody was watching. Then he nodded to Harry, who reached into his belt and pulled out a long switchblade. With swift, short strokes, the bouncer started to slash the upholstery of the Jeep. Frank noticed the sticker of a car rental company above the back bumper. Seeing a flamingo pink beach towel draped over the back seat next to a straw hat with a pink band, Frank felt a sick feeling grow in his stomach. That was definitely Bess's hat, and the Jeep they were vandalizing was Nancy Drew's. End of chapter 10. Yeah, Bougainville Villa? I don't know. I thought he was a soccer player. I don't know. I thought it was a sandwich. Man is sometimes foolish. Right. I read about another plant. I believe the article referred to it as dank weed. Are they good singers or dancers, or are we just to humor them? Hi, a sweet voice came from behind him. It was Big Island Mike. That is scarier than any horror movie. I was sure the chapter was going to end with Frank getting knocked off the road. Yeah. Thank you for claps. CJ, please. One second, I need to check a text message. I need to blow my nose real quick. I will be right back. While I was blowing my nose, I remembered a dream I had recently, and it's actually a terrible idea, and I will not be doing this, just to preface this. But I had a dream that I had an idea to read, like, fan fiction during stream, like a read stream of fan fiction, and I asked you guys to, like, send me fan fictions to read. And it was, like, the weirdest stuff. So I will not be doing that. I'm just gonna say, But yeah. Thank you for the shout outs. I appreciate them. Yeah, that could be dangerous. Ellie did that? Oh, that poor soul. Yeah, no. She read some Sonic fan fiction. It went about as well as you'd expect. Oh, no. No, yeah, I definitely should not do that. Like, I've dived into the world of reading fan fiction, but I can see it coming. And I'll just be like, okay, this is not the story for me. Back away. But I have, like, admittedly, I have, like, actually found and read, like, some really good fan fictions that are, like, not gross. Like, I remember years ago, I found, like, a really good Nancy fan fiction, and it was, like, a mystery. It was just, like, a good, well thought out mystery, and I enjoyed it a lot. I don't know if I could find it again, but, you know, stuff like that. Like, I don't hate it all. I just think it's a dangerous territory. Yeah, exactly. You have to sort through a lot. My thing about fan fiction is that, like, word to the wise is do not get invested in a story before you are sure that it is safe to proceed. I don't think I've ever read fan fiction. Maybe I wrote it when I was just... If you want a fan fiction, you should just find stuff you enjoy that isn't... Exactly. It's like, you can search out, like, good fan fiction, but yeah, a lot of times it'll be like, it starts to get, like, really spicy, and I'm like, oh, this is not for me! This isn't for me. Yeah. You just gotta know, you know? You just gotta be aware of your surroundings. Yeah, always check the tags. That's good advice right there. Before starting. And the like rating, because I know, like, a lot of fanfic things have you, like, put the rating. You should check the rating. That's okay. It'll happen for you, Coco. Don't worry. You know, don't beat yourself up or feel like you have to hold yourself to some sort of unrealistic timeline for yourself. People live their life at different paces, so. All right, let's do one more chapter. Exactly, Tara, exactly. Oh no. That's a good way to sum it up. Oh no. Okay. Chapter 11. Hidden behind a maroon Dodge Caravan, Frank watched in amazement as Willie joined Harry in slashing up the seats. He stopped periodically and ran his hand under the upholstery, feeling for something. Harry stopped and knelt down to look at the underside of the vehicle. Apparently, neither of them found what he wanted. Willie got out of the Jeep and kicked a tire. Harry pulled himself out from underneath, cursing. Then the two headed for the terminal several hundred yards away. Harry strode forcefully with Willie right behind him, only slightly slowed by his limp. Frank followed immediately. He had just been jolted into a new and startling realization. The murder and art thefts were connected. Not only that, Harry and Willie were involved in both. How did it all work? Where was the real connection? Worst of all, Frank thought, if Willie and Harry had just slashed up a Jeep, what were they about to do to the girls? Frank bolted for the terminal. He had to know where they were going. Inside, he thought he saw Harry moving toward the gates. Frank took off after him, but had trouble getting through the crowd. A large tour group was making its way toward Frank. Frank plowed on, then stopped when he caught a flash of reddish-blonde hair. "Nancy!" he called as she emerged from the restroom with George and Bess. "Frank, what are you doing here?" The girls looked happy and refreshed from their day's outing. "Boy, am I glad to see that you guys are okay." Frank breathed a sigh of relief. "No problems on Niihau?" Nancy shook her head. "No, everything went fine," she said, although at first I thought the pilot may have been keeping an eye on us for Johnny Leong. Turns out Leong hired him for a private trip. "Speaking of Leongs, Harry and Willie are here in the airport. They were just outside trashing your Jeep, in fact." "What do you mean trashing it?" George asked. "They ripped the interior to shreds," Frank told them. "Then they went that-a-way." He pointed down the corridor toward the gates. "Looking for you, I guess." The crowd was pretty much gone by now. "Those creeps!" Bess said. "Did they rip up my hat, too?" Before Frank could answer, Nancy gave him a small push. Quick, here they come, she cried. Let's disappear. The girls ducked back into the ladies' room, and Frank moved across the hall to the men's. Keeping the door... I thought Nancy was about to push Frank into the girls' bathroom, which would have been funny. Keeping the door open a crack, Frank spied Willie and Harry walking back down the corridor. They seemed to be arguing. Frank waited until the two were safely past. Then he went over to the ladies' room door. All clear, he said. As the girls emerged, he added, I guess they'll head on out of here now. They must figure they missed you. Bess shivered despite the heat. What do we do now? She asked. For starters, we'd better call the rental car company and tell them what happened, Nancy suggested. George and Bess went off to the phone, and Frank turned to Nancy. I guess our two cases really are related. This business with the Jeep makes it pretty clear, Nancy said. Frank, I may have a lead. There's a post office box that Kame Kilauea's been sending Malflowers to. He says they go to a Swiss research company, but it sounds fishy to me. Anything else? Frank asked. Remember the first day we talked? You told me Joe overheard Harry talking about the big man. What about it? So who can the big man be? Big probably doesn't refer to size, so it must refer to the big boss of the ring. What Nancy was saying made sense. Small-time thugs like Harry and Willie had to be working under someone if they were to succeed in robbing the state of its most priceless treasures. Good news, Bess said cheerfully, interrupting Frank's thoughts. The guy at the rental agency is reporting the damage and said we should wait by the Jeep. They'll bring us a replacement. Okay, let's see how bad it is, Nancy said, steeling herself to see the damage. Wow, Bess said when they reached the Jeep. I wonder why they didn't slash the tires and turn it over while they were at it. They probably didn't have time, Nancy said. If they were planning to meet us at the gate, that is. Lucky thing we got in early. Suddenly, Frank remembered that Joe was still at the beach. Oh no, he cried. Joe must be wondering where I've gone. Bess looked at her watch. It's so late, she said. Don't you think he got a lift home from somebody? Or if he survived the competition, George added. You ought to check, Frank. Come on, I'll ride with you. I don't know, Frank said hesitantly. I don't want to leave you girls alone. It's okay, Nancy said with a laugh. Bess can defend us if anyone gives us any trouble. Right, Bess? Making a muscle, Bess clenched her teeth and raised her arm bravely. Seriously, Nancy said, I don't think Harry or Willie will show up here again. They'll figure that we reported the damage to our Jeep, and they'll want to be far away. I guess so, Frank said. Okay, George, let's go. See you guys later, George said and walked off with Frank. My car's over here, Frank told her, leading her to the spot. Want to ride with the top down? Sure, George said. Soon they were driving down the highway with a warm breeze in their faces. The views are incredible, she said, staring out at the ocean. Is Makaha a big beach? You'll see it soon, he answered. It's great when there's no traffic, isn't it? George said. I'll say, Frank agreed. Rounding the next bend, he had to steer his car off the narrow highway. What in the world? He murmured. There, parked across the road, was a big boat of a car, a Lincoln Continental with its hood up. The sprawling Lincoln completely blocked the highway. If it's overheated, why don't they push it off the road? Frank asked, annoyed. Maybe it was an accident, George said, sounding as if she didn't think it had been. Shall we help? Frank asked, pushing his door open as George did too. Frank? George said, afraid. Frank turned and saw two masked men approaching from the opposite side of the road. Each of them carried a semi-automatic rifle in his burly arms. Hey, wait a minute, Frank said, holding up his palms. The men responded by raising their weapons higher and setting their sights. No! Frank shouted as George screamed. The rifle went off with a soft ping. Frank watched horrified as George slowly crumpled to the ground. George! He yelled, starting off around the front of the car to her. He had only a fraction of a second to wonder why there had been no loud bang. Then the ping sounded again, and the whole world went black. Chapter 11. What a terrible place for me to leave off, huh? One ring to rule them all. There's a AT song that's inspired by Lord of the Rings, and that's a line from it. Hi, Coley! Thank you for shouting out, Coley. Cliffhanger for reals. Alright, I think that's where I'm gonna finish today. We have read 11 chapters. Let me see how many chapters there are. There are 24 chapters, so we are just shy of halfway. So it'll probably be 2 more streams to finish this up. So George is dead. Cool. And I think Frank, too. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you to all of the people on YouTube in the future that do not give me a hard time for things. I appreciate you guys. Take care of yourselves. Much love, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.